He's gonna have to fight! Bang! Pressure's coming! Dumped! Hogtied! When you've given everything, what will the record books say about you, Matthew?
Hey there, gamers. Welcome back for Season 2, Episode 35 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Last week was the World Series recap first. Dodger Ball got it done again as LA's billion-dollar roster was crowned back-to-back champs. I reviewed all my predictions and gave them all their flowers as if they needed any more. Then I reviewed that Thursday night dumpster fire of a football game between the Raiders and Broncos, and I gave you one last reminder about my recent powerlifting meet on the mic, where you could find it and why I was excited about it. That was about it. Speaking of that meet, this week I will first address the probably obvious. My voice is hanging on by a thread right now. That stream ran over 7 hours this past Saturday the 8th. I've had a long work week already with a big weekend ahead of me, and I considered skipping a week here or pushing this episode back even a couple of days. I've chosen to tough it out, and I'm going to just try and limit the damage as much as possible. I didn't want to do something like that until I really have to with this show. I'm going to just try and bump my gain a little bit for all of you audio nerds and let the mic do the work. All sob stories aside, trade deadlines are coming up in most fantasy football leagues, so let's have ourselves a good old-fashioned Fantasy Football Friday. Up first, let's talk about those trade deadlines and how to manage them. I've mentioned a number of times that I play ESPN full point per reception, one league with 9 players and one league with 10. The ESPN default trade deadline is set for noon Eastern on November 26th, so I'll give you tips in alignment with that. The number one thing you need to know about the trade deadline if you're new is that after that point, the only way you'll be able to make additions to your roster is through the waiver wire. You'll no longer be allowed to make trades, hence the name. The deeper your league is, meaning the more total players are in it, the more difficult it is to get any of your top waiver wire targets, especially if you have a good record. Most leagues' waiver wire priority goes in reverse order of the standings, so if you have the best record in the league, then you would get the lowest priority. My number one tip here is no matter if you want to hold on to everyone you currently have or hit on someone big with a deadline deal, consider what NFL teams' current situation is holistically. What do I mean by that? Well, when it comes to the playoffs in fantasy, they're always so tricky. Some IRL teams have nothing to play for. They've either locked up their playoff seeding already or they've been mathematically eliminated. That can lead to tanking. That can lead to backups in the starting lineup, less aggressive play calling, other kinds of things that kill fantasy outputs. Look at the NFL standings and align your expectations of players with those. The best possible scenario you can find is a team that is just on the edge or just outside of the current playoff picture and that has to absolutely scrap and claw for every win during the fantasy playoffs. Those are typically roughly weeks 15 through 18-ish of the NFL season, depending on how your league is set up. There's some little bonuses that make you feel even better about potential production, too. Teams with bad defenses have to score more to keep up. The 2025 Cowboys are probably one of the best examples I've ever seen of this. They're 4th in scoring offense and 31st in scoring defense. 4th in total yards per game offensively, 31st in total yards allowed. It's strange that both of those numbers perfectly mirror each other, but it tells us what we already knew. A pathetic defense is not good for winning football games, but it's great for winning fantasy football matchups. The next tip goes right alongside the first one. This one requires more practice, forethought, even patience, but it's to consider what your players' projections will be like during the fantasy playoffs. This can be more of a luxury than most other tips here. Some of us are just in leagues that are too deep, or we've had too much bad injury luck, or something kind of went wrong with our drafts and we didn't get everybody that we want, so we can't perfectly set ourselves up for a championship run. Some of us have to scour waivers and make a bunch of streaming plays all the time and make dramatic lineup changes week to week to get by. And then some of us drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba and Jonathan Taylor, and those two alone are averaging, 55, 60 points, and they never have to make any big lineup decisions. Here's an example of setting yourself up for a playoff run. Second-year running back Bucky Irving has been out of the Bucs lineup since Week 4 with a shoulder injury. Rashad White has done an okay job filling in, but not particularly overwhelming. You're talking 217 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, and 18 catches for 99 yards in those 5 weeks. Bucky Irving ran away with the starting job last year. The Bucs' opponents during Week 15, 16, and 17 are the Falcons, Panthers, and Dolphins. Off the top of your head, you're probably thinking those aren't good defenses, and you'd be correct. but they are specifically not good at all against the run and defending receiving running backs. Those teams rank 29th, 20th, and 25th in fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs. Bucky Irving is real valuable on his own as he catches the ball well, and the Bucs offense has, of course, been moving and grooving, and they get lots of red zone trips, but he's even more valuable come fantasy playoff time with matchups like that. He should be a top trade target before the deadline for anyone that needs another stud running back for their playoff run. That's just one example. Justin Jefferson is another one. Although he would definitely cost more to give up, he's also Justin Jefferson. You might have heard of him. He's still a top 3 to 5 option every single week among receivers. He's learning to get along with J.J. McCarthy, and surely they'll build some more chemistry over there with the Vikings, but he still should be a lock in lineups every single week until the day he retires. In those same weeks, 15 through 17 of the NFL season, the Vikings play the Cowboys, Giants, and Lions. Those are the 32nd, 21st, and 24th ranked defenses as ranked by fantasy points allowed to opposing receivers. That is quite literally as good as it gets down the stretch in terms of matchups. If I were essentially a rookie quarterback like J.J. McCarthy is, and I have a guy who can catch everything, yeah, I would feed him all the time. If you have a star wide receiver and another good trade piece to give away, who might both have more difficult matchups during the fantasy playoffs, then Justin Jefferson is another fantastic trade target. Next tip is to consider players that are currently injured or on their bye week. If you're a little newer and you just go over to waivers and you look for the very top projections to determine who you need to add, you might be missing out on a league winner somewhere. I have Commanders QB Jayden Daniels on injured reserve in one of my leagues, so I'm essentially getting an extra bench spot there. Did you all see that dislocated elbow? That was so gruesome. I'll apologize in advance, but I will drop a video link in the description if you haven't seen it. It's just baffling that he was left in late in the fourth quarter of a blowout like that. And Dan Quinn, their head coach, did say as much. Nonetheless, my starting quarterback in that league is now Daniel Jones. But what if Daniel Jones crashes back to earth and he starts looking like, well, Daniel Jones again instead of an MVP frontrunner in those last few weeks of the season? I don't know when or if Jayden Daniels will come back this year, but I do know that he isn't worth anything to anyone just sitting on the waiver wire. The moment you pick up a player like him, or Mike Evans, or Brock Purdy, or the most likely of all to be available, Joe Burrow, that is, anybody that's been injured and has been out for a while, that player is yours, no matter what value they end up producing. These are all recommendations for players I would target, but that's not an exhaustive list by any means. Scan your waivers a little bit closer and make sure you use your IR slot for good. Last tip is something I mentioned a couple of times last year, and it's easy to forget about it at the deadline, but then want it in the playoffs. Depth is no longer a factor when you get right down to the nitty and the gritty. Depth is great for when you have a lot of bye weeks, which end in the NFL after week 14. Depth is great for injury replacements, but most players that have played 14 weeks uninjured are likely to make it through 18 weeks uninjured. Depth does not typically win you championships. You want 9 total ringers, 9 of the best players you can possibly get by the time your fantasy playoffs start. Your trade offers and deals toward the deadline should start pushing your roster in that direction. You might not like thinking about what you would do if one of these 9 starting spots suffered an injury or had a really bad matchup during the playoffs, but I just don't believe that's something you can control. So those are the biggest tips that I can offer. Be sure to take those, run with them, and, well, do your best because it will always come down to luck to a degree in the end. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we've finally had a second head coaching change in the NFL. The first one was sacrificial. The Titans' Brian Callahan had next to zero starting caliber NFL talent to work with, and he only made it to October 13th. Now the Giants' Brian Daboll can finally see his name come off of that hot seat list and can take the rest of the year off if he chooses. You can't lose twice as many games as you win and stay a head coach for very long. That's what he did with a career record of 20, 40, and 1. And strangely, that one playoff win with Daniel Jones back in 2022. That was the team's only playoff appearance since 2016. Just about every other year, they were in contention for the top pick in the draft at some point, and they were among the most dysfunctional organizations. I put Daboll's name toward the top of my list of coaches on the hot seat as I viewed it multiple times last year. I never thought he would make it out of the 2024 calendar year, even when the offense found a couple of super rookies in last year's draft, with Tyrone Tracy being a 1,000-yard rusher, and then Malik Neighbors having one of those Jamar Chase / Puka Nacua type seasons. Despite those great skill players, their defense is still consistently in the bottom 5 around the league. They don't do any of the little things very well either. They're worst in the league in extra point percentage. They're 4th worst in net punting with the 4th most total punts. They don't have a single non-offensive touchdown, and they're generally making football harder with all of those factors considered. Funny enough, they really hit on another draft this year, so I do want to give the front office a lot of credit for that. Jackson Dart's 17 total touchdowns to 3 interceptions at quarterback is elite. And of course, imagine what they could have been with a full season of Cam Scatteraboo as the starting running back. Now Dart went out and got concussed on Sunday against the Bears. Scatteraboo's ankle is snapped into many pieces. Neighbors has a torn ACL. Tyrone Tracy's dealt with some injuries and he hasn't been effective at under 4 yards a carry. And the Giants were left with no choice. Daboll had to go. They have as much reason to chase the number 1 pick in the draft now as they do to win another game this year. And at 2-8, that's a very reasonable proposition for them to lose out. The other 2 or less win teams right now are the Jets at 2-8, the Raiders at 2-7, the Saints at 2-8, and the lowly Titans are still the only 1-win team in the league. This firing doesn't affect much fantasy-wise, but the one thing that does, again, Jackson Dart was concussed on Sunday, so now the Giants are going to start Jameis Winston at quarterback this week. I only wish it wasn't against the Packers' defense. Green Bay doesn't look quite as elite as they did the first couple of weeks, but I have to believe that they're still capable of winning a Super Bowl with Micah Parsons coming off the edge. I can personally guarantee you that Jameis is going to throw a minimum of 40 passes this Sunday, and that is awesome for fantasy. New York will, in all likelihood, spend a bunch of time trailing too, so all the signs are there. Theo Johnson is a tight end I've had my eyes on for a while. He has 5 touchdowns on just 33 catches with the Giants this year. At wide receiver, Wan'Dale Robinson continues to be one of the most targeted players in the league at 7.9 a game. And also at receiver, Darius Slayton is averaging almost 15 yards a catch, plus he has yet to score a touchdown in 8 games. In all likelihood, that negative regression is going to catch up, and he will get in the end zone on Sunday. Now granted, Jameis could struggle tremendously, and the Giants could make another move back to Russell Wilson at quarterback, and the fantasy production could be terrible. But my best guess is Jameis will give them some kind of spark, and then you can upgrade all Giants skill players in fantasy this week, at least beyond what you normally would against a team like the Packers. I kind of hope this isn't the only week that Jameis starts, as much because of the fantasy impact as the fact that he's one of the most entertaining and interesting QBs we've ever seen. And we'll polish this week off with reviewing MLB postseason awards. They still need a cooler name, and MLB Honors would be absolutely perfect, but postseason awards is what they've chosen. There was so much deja vu. Normally I'd tell you who got snubbed for what and why, but I feel like the voters absolutely killed these. I'll also compare the results to my most recent postseason awards predictions all the way back in episode 23 of this season. Cy Youngs were pretty easy to pick here. The Tigers' Tarek Skubal and the Pirates' Paul Skeens were what we call in the business dead ringers. Skeens was unanimous. Skubal lost out on 4 first-place votes to the Red Sox' Garrett Crochet. I think we're actually seeing a big voter bias towards strikeouts, as that's arguably what Crochet does best. He led the majors in strikeouts and strikeouts per 9, and quietly also innings at 205 1/3. Skubal basically led the American League in everything else, some of the most ridiculous stats being a 7.3 strikeout to walk ratio and 8.91 whip. I love that. That means if he gives up a single base runner in an inning, he puts himself behind his average pace. He is now the first back-to-back Cy Young winner since Jacob deGrom. Man, I miss prime deGrom. Skeens had a 1.97 ERA, and that's kind of all I need to tell you. I'll also go on to say he's the youngest starter to go under a 2 ERA in a full season since Dwight Gooden in 1985, and his career ERA, if he had enough innings to qualify right now, would be the 4th best of all time. And the top 3 pitched in either the 1870s or the 1910s. Christopher Sanchez of the Phillies was actually second in the entire league in wins above replacement with 8, a tick above Skeens at 7.6, but every single other number besides innings favors Skeens. A super deserving unanimous vote. The MVPs were Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani. Man, where have we heard that before? The Judge and Cal Raleigh vote ended up super close, with Judge getting 17 first-place votes to Raleigh's 13, and I'm happy that every voter had these guys as their top 2. No one else deserved mention, frankly, when one guy hit 60 homers and the other guy hit 331 with 50 homers. There's 30 total voters in each league, as a reminder, 2 from each ballpark city. Scuba was 5th in the voting, with one voter putting him as high as 3rd, and Jose Ramirez and Bobby Witt Jr. were 3rd and 4th, respectively. I had this one nailed back in August, and I could have predicted it in April. And if we're being brutally honest, you could have predicted it in the middle of last year that they'd both continue to dominate the sport for at least a few more years. For Ohtani, this was his 4th selection, 2 each in the AL and NL, and all unanimous. And of course, for Judge, it's his 3rd, so he's already among those inner circle Hall of Fame, greatest hitters of all time, as if that were in question. It's the first time that both league MVPs have won in back-to-back years being the same guys, and as they're still at the height of their powers, it might not even be the last. Managers of the Year were also repeats. Did not see this coming until the Tigers started to collapse at the end of the season, and even then I'd have liked to see John Schneider win with Toronto in the AL. Instead, it's Stephen Vogt of the Guardians and Pat Murphy of the Brewers, once again. We know Milwaukee had the best regular season record, so Murphy makes all the sense in the world. But Cleveland, in a still weak AL Central, won 88 games. They only took the division from Detroit by 1 game because of that historic collapse, and now Vogt is the first ever to win the award in each of his first 2 seasons as an MLB manager. So that's the one that doesn't sit right with me out of everything, but more than anything, it's because the Chicago White Sox play in the Central, so I shouldn't hold that against him too much. I did think the Tigers' A.J. Hinch was going to start making some noise, but I also figured Detroit would finish a lot stronger than they did. I might review a couple more of these awards next week, like Gold Gloves and Silver Sluggers and such, but that is all for today, and reviewing the MLB postseason awards. Happy to report that Powerlifting America West Michigan Classic 2 was an absolute smash hit success. I got a ton of social content, and I'll tell you where to find all that in a moment like I always do. I ran the whole thing self-contained on my MacBook. We had 7+ hours of gorgeous 1080p 60 FPS. A bunch of my friends competed, and I got to make new friends, connections, get new exposure. Only trade-off is, again, my voice is a little bit shaky, a little on the edge. I saw tons of state records go down, and I still love the age range of competitors. I think this time it was ages 17 to 59. One of the 17-year-old kids benched 391, and the 59-year-old lady was taking state records on her second attempts and all that. Guys, it's just such an awesome sport. I'm going to keep preaching about it. I hope I can create a few new fans of it as I work toward being this sort of highly unofficial voice of powerlifting. Did my best to rest my voice the last couple of days, but I had another busy work week this week before recording here on Friday morning, and I appreciate your patience as I go through, like, all of the home remedies, the honey, the salt water. Changing my toothbrush was one thing I had never heard of, but it makes plenty of sense. Everything in the bathroom just builds up this fine layer of bacteria. Have fun thinking about that the next time you brush. But then, of course, whatever's left on there after you brush winds up going back in your mouth. That last one, changing the toothbrush head, seems to have helped. Plus, I'm getting into tongue scrapers. And, of course, a sugar-free lozenge hates to see me coming right now. So thanks for coming back week after week, or if you're relatively new here, as always, we're happy to have you. Either way, check out all my socials where you can find all that powerlifting content and content on every single other sport I've ever covered. My arena soccer opener is going to be this weekend too on Saturday, so tune in for all that stuff. Instagram, TikTok, Threads, @TheVoiceOfTanner, X, just Voice of Tanner, YouTube, the whole thing spelled out with spaces. Connect on LinkedIn, leave a like, comment, and share, and I'll catch you next week. This has been Season 2, Episode 35 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me.
He's gonna have to fight! Bang! Pressure's coming! Dumped! Hogtied! When you've given everything, what will the record books say about you, man?